Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're going to be taking a look at Witchburner. This is a short adventure, I think quite appropriate for the Halloween season, even though I realize this is coming out after Halloween. It's created by Luca Reyetz, who is the author of such works as Ultraviolet Grasslands, which is a fantastic setting that I really liked. This isn't a setting though, this is more of a small situation that the players are going to be getting into and having to work through, mostly using social means, although of course they can do whatever they want. It's effectively system neutral. I think the assumption is that it's going to work for OSR, but you could really use it for pretty much any game since there's not really any stats in it. It says on the back here that Witchburner is an intimate, claustrophobic delve into a small town beset by witchcraft. It casts the heroes in the role of witchfinders, whether witting or unwitting, whom the town expects to find and burn the witch. This third edition contains more color. Before we dive into this though, quick shout out to our wonderful patrons over on the Questing Beast Patreon. They help support this channel and they get to see these videos before YouTube. They get access to the secret Questing Beast Discord and so on. Shout outs to new patrons will be at the end of this video. Also a shout out to today's sponsor. There's a Kickstarter that just launched called Fluxfall Horizon. It's a Powered by the Apocalypse RPG by Dave Thomavor. The idea in this game is that you're a traveler from the 24th century who can go to parallel Earths. Since it's a game of high sci-fi adventure, nothing goes right for you, and you end up jumping from world to world looking for a way home, or otherwise trying to fulfill your secret objective. You can pick up quantum powers and all kinds of fun ultra tech along the way. The game itself is built for one-shots and short campaigns, and has easy rules for fast narrative play. Check out the Kickstarter in the link below. All right, let's see what we get inside the book here. This is all done in looks like a perfect bound, glued bound format. So it's quite nice looking. The paper quality is really nice. The covers feel great. The perfect bound nature of the binding does mean that it doesn't really lay open. It really wants to stay closed. That's just how that binding works, which is a little annoying. Not really a huge deal. You just have to kind of hold it open, perhaps with one hand, while you're reading it on the table, if you're going to be running this. Starting at the beginning here. So it says that, yeah, it's basically the same thing it says on the back right there. The fire will set you free. Here are our table of contents. It features a lot of Luca's very distinctive looking artwork, mostly in black and white, but there is some color in here as well. The advantage of him being the writer, the designer, the illustrator means that everything has a very coherent feel, which is really great to see in these kinds of indie products, when one person is the mastermind behind everything. So we start with the town right here. This is the town of Bridge, where this investigation into witch finding is going to take place. The folk here call it Bridge. The clerks call it St. Clear Eyes because there's a big bridge here over this river. So it's kind of a focal point strategically in the region. If you want to get over this river, you have to come here. There is a good deal of fiction or like fiction-like writing describing situations. So that has a bit of a novella-like feel to it. But it does a really good job in setting the tone for the Game Master. I don't think you're really expected to read this stuff out loud. I don't think I would. But it really ingrains in your head the tone that it's going for and the atmosphere that you're going to be trying to create for the players. So how to run Witchburner. This is a timed adventure. So it's going to take place over a limited amount of time, several weeks, I think 4 weeks. And by the end of that time, hopefully you have identified the witch. You have brought her to justice. You have presented enough evidence to the council that you're able to convict that witch and burn him or her. If you do not, by the end of that time period, the townspeople will probably decide that you and your party are the witch and they're going to be coming after you. So there's a bit of a clock there. The townsfolk will get more and more riled up as things go on and as people start to mistrust you based on your actions, because likely you're going to be taking actions that are going to make people dislike you. So there's a structure here. Time is divided into watches. So each day you can do 4 major actions like sleep or meet with someone or do an investigation. So that breaks down time into these neat little chunks that you're going to be using to go about things fairly procedurally. You're also going to be tracking the attitude of the non-player characters. Whether they like you or dislike you affects how quickly they turn against you. But also, if you get a lot of people to like you, then it's going to be easier to convict people because they'll require less evidence from you. There's a whole system here for how much evidence you need to have before someone can be convicted. So, spoiler alert, there actually is no witch. All of the weird signs and omens that have been happening to this town that make everyone suspect that there is a witch are all sheer coincidences. So no matter what you do, if you decide to actually convict someone, you will be killing an innocent person, if you go through with it. Of course, you could just try to book it out of town. There are other options, but a lot of players will try and investigate a witch and try and actually convict someone. And the way that it's set up, all the different NPCs have a lot of evidence pointing towards them. They're very tangled up in the lives of the other people in the town, and they often have trinkets or backstory that might connect them to being a witch, and so you'll find evidence no matter where you look. Here's the system for bringing a witch to trial. You have different councils or different social groups within the town. You have the lodge members, the cult members, the counselors, and the outsiders. These 4 different basic groups of people that are allied with each other in common interest in one way or another. If you look at the very back here, I think this is the best way of explaining this. There's some great little sheets. When you're trying to convict someone, you have a couple different suspects that you might have here. And you can write down here the different pieces of evidence that you have discovered that points to them being the witch. And you're going to have to collect more evidence depending on a number of different factors. For example, how much the people that you're trying to convince like you or dislike you. You need to have at least 2. But if you want to try and convict the mayor, for example, you're going to need 6 pieces. Counselor needs 5 pieces. A social ally of a counselor needs 4 pieces, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of different factors that can come into play here. So you'll be tracking all of these all this stuff on these sheets. So for example, here's the 30 major NPCs, and you can check off whether they love or fear you, respectively. Evidence of witchcraft found. So here's a whole bunch of different ideas that either you as the game master can sprinkle into the setting for players to find, although the game includes a lot of inherent ones. Citizen's attitude. When you meet someone, you can roll a 2d6 on this table, and it could be anything from they lie smoothly and maliciously to you, or they lie smoothly to make things easier for the heroes, inventing facts as needed. Right? A lot of people just try and be helpful or are wary or but cooperative. So that's typically what people's reaction can be, but you can get a nice variety there. Statements or lies told by citizens. Lots of great material here for you to use. It doesn't just give you NPCs and say, go for it. It gives you concrete stuff that you can throw at the players. So for example, I found cloven hoof prints on the doormat. Then that same afternoon, they were gone. Or for example, I heard a burbling, and then saw them go swimming with the overwaterman at night. Optional victory. If the standard setup here where there really is no witch is just a little bit too dark for you, you can set things up so that there is a witch. You basically pick 3 players, or 3 NPCs rather. One of them is going to be the witch. One of them is charmed by the witch magically. And one of them is charmed by the witch's words or deeds. And these NPCs are going to be working for the witch and might try and cover for her. So it still adds an element of investigation. You could find someone that is probably the witch. Everything points towards them, but it might still not be them because they could just be helping to protect her. So there's still a lot that you can do there. So a lot of people, I think, might go for this just because it's a very grim setting and a very grim outcome. But that's there if you need it. Basic system for watches here, and what happens if you go without sleep for long periods of time. I love this little system, alcohol. As you go around from house to house and you meet with NPCs, serving visitors alcohol is just part of the tradition. You can't really refuse it. If you do, they'll start to dislike you, and that has repercussions. So if you go through the normal customs, you just get drunker and drunker as the day goes on, and you're talking to more and more people. And then there's effects of that as well. How the mob works, once more than half of the town dislikes you, you start rolling to see if they happen to turn against you. And when they do, all those people turn against you, plus a whole bunch of other hangers-on that are just along for the ride. There's rules for what happens if you torture someone. This is a game about investigating witches, so torture is probably going to be something that the players are going to come up with. It does advise you probably want to fade to black, just because people are uncomfortable with actually playing that out. And then you can roll a d20 to see what they say after you put them to the test, so to speak. There's a little excerpt here from the Malleus Maleficarum, which means the Hammer of the Witches, which is a real witch hunting text from the Middle Ages, which I believe was suppressed by the Inquisition because it was just too far out there. It went too far. So that gives you kind of a sense of what people in this mindset were thinking. Some stats here. You don't really need the stats. They're just suggested. This is more for D&D-like systems, but any sort of fantasy role-playing game can work perfectly well. There really isn't actually any magic per se in this adventure. So you could even run it in a historical game, I bet. Some random encounters here. Woodland gnomes. Well, I guess that's fairly fantasy related. Shepherds, local hunters. Night encounter could be anything from some foxes or owls to a moon dragon. The 30 citizens, just listed right here in case you need to roll them up. Their name as well as their role and what faction they are part of. 30 calamities. So as time goes on, there's 30 days that this takes place over. One new calamity happens every day, and everyone is always interpreting that as an effect of what the witch is doing. Here we have an actual day-by-day breakdown. This is really nice. I love how specific and concrete it is. So as each day goes by, you can tell what's the morning like. So the 4th day is Monday, Franz. I guess that's the name of the day in this setting. The morning, fog is thick as brick, cold and damp. The wise wives whisper that Citizen X has gone missing unexpectedly. So basically at the start of the game, you pick like 4 different NPCs and assign them to be like W, X, Y, and Z, and then you just slot them in here as needed. Afternoon, blazing sun, last swallows fly south, hot. The calamity of this day, a sudden hailstorm strikes out of the blue, damaging the plum trees and devastating the fig harvest. Evening, wind from the west, some moonlight, chilly and humid. Night, clear, harsh stars and cold. I love how it gives you weather for all the different, for basically the 4 different watches, so that whenever the players are in that watch, you know what the environment is like. Great stuff. We also have the little symbols here for the current phase of the moon in case that becomes relevant. The people of Bridge, so we have a more detailed breakdown of our NPCs here. And the real effect of the way that Luca has written these is hard to get across without actually reading one. So I think that is what I am going to do. So let's read the first one. The mayor, Edna Kingsname, council leader, nervous, greasy, red-haired, calculating. We cannot make a deal with that devil, groaned Petra, slumping back in her leather chair. We don't really have a choice, grinned Ivana, the doctor. It's just a 5-year contract, nodded the schoolmaster. Those are imperial watchtowers. You're suggesting that we sign them over to that foreign gold digger. Edna crunched down in the sugar grass candy she was rolling around in her mouth and looked from one side to the other. Was the Empire really that weak now? Was there any other way to maintain those towers and avoid the commissaire's censure? We've been talking about this for 3 years, grumbled the priest. Edna brightened and looked at the wild-haired man in his tight flower-embroidered surcoat. Ciro Slingstringer, we are a fallible townspeople. Our fears of the burner years and worries for the future are natural. It has been too long. This is the time to invoke the oracles. The priest's mouth tightened and fear spidered the skin around his eyes. I know it is risky and costly. Edna looked at the doctor, but I am certain all of the counselors will gladly contribute to ensure a safe divination. Ivana's mouth puckered, but she nodded. Yes, of course. We must all sacrifice for the good of the community. The woman sweats like a pig and shivers like a wet dog, but she'd wield the headsman's axe herself if it won her another crown, chuckled the wise wives. Under her bed is an old royalist sword, given to her grandfather by the last queen. She has no imagination, says the innkeeper, shaking her head. So everyone starts off with this little piece of fiction of the character interacting with other characters, so you get a good sense of how they think, how they talk, how they act. Instead of just spelling it out, you actually get to see it happen, which I really like. It requires a little bit more work. You're going to have to read through this whole thing to really get into the heads of these NPCs, but it does a really great job at doing that. One little fun quirk of all these descriptions is that it often has these little inserts by the wise wives or the wise beards, who are just like the old people of the town, sitting on a bench under a tree. And they're kind of like the Greek chorus. So that whenever you're talking to characters, off in the background, you'll hear them muttering this stuff, and you can pick up background information from them. I love that. We have what their house is like, any secret lore they might happen to have. So for example, she has good at charming compromise. Edna has an incredible talent at convincing people to accept compromises. When Edna suggests something halfway unsatisfying to feuding sides, they likely acquiesce. We have any treasures that she might have, and her household, who her father is, her husband, her son, her butler, the household, the guard, a clockwork man. And there's one of those for every single one of the 30 NPCs. They each get a page of a little bit of a fiction and all these little pieces of information that you can use to investigate them further, find the connections between other NPCs, and perhaps visit them next. Most of them get a little illustration to go along with them. There's some bits of colored art here. There's the bridge over the river. The Little Water Cook, Peppy Oldson, or the Wild Child, Carl Foundling. The Beekeeper, Olga Prince Brewer. Luca does a really great job with names. They're very concrete and they're very specific. Those are words that I use a lot when I talk about Luca's work. And that takes up most of the rest of the book because that is the bulk of what you're going to be using when you're running this. There is some extra advice at the back here for running Witchburner as a one-shot. It's by default, it's not going to work because it's 30 days long. It's a lot of investigating. This can be a mini campaign almost. But you can adapt it to be a one-shot by starting very near the end of the time. So you only have like a week or less left. And then you can kind of fill them in with what's happened so far by giving these letters to the players. These are letters from previous Witchburners that were there that sent back information about how their investigations had gone so far. So players are off to a running start. We have a little appendix here, the gods and faith of the local people. Some local cities and places, names. So here's a whole bunch of different, I think these are mostly the names of the NPCs, but then it actually gives you a more foreign sounding name or one that isn't just a combination of nouns, which is what most of the names are, with a pronunciation guide. We have a huge appendix of just music, which is really great with YouTube links. So there's quite a lot of these. I wonder if there's one for each day. I bet that there is. Oh, wait, you know what? I was wrong when I said that this is glue bound. There is stitches right there. This is in fact stitch bound. I hadn't noticed that before. So that's really great. So that means it's very sturdy. It's going to hold together real well. Unfortunately, it doesn't lie very flat though. We have some more worksheets at the back here. Here's a referee worksheet with all the different characters, this time grouped into their different factions. So the counselors are all here at the top, but the priest here is part of the counselors and he's also part of the cult, whereas the innkeeper is part of the counselors and part of the lodge. Ordinary folk and they have outsiders over here. Here is a time tracker, so you can go through and check off each morning, afternoon, evening, and night as you go through your 4 weeks here. And the player worksheet we saw before, and what follows. So you have basically a couple different outcomes. A witch is actually burned, no witch is burned, and the heroes fail, or the heroes convince the town that there never was any witch. That would be difficult to do, but in theory, it's possible. And then we have the outcomes. Unfortunately, all of these strange calamities that were listed here are basically going to happen. So oftentimes when the players convince the town that there is no witch, calamities continue to happen afterwards. And they start to believe that perhaps they were wrong or they've angered the gods somehow. So there's still could be repercussions down the line no matter what you do. And there we go. That is the end of the book. A great little social adventure. I love how many tools it gives you to run it, so that when you run into an NPC, you have a lot of stuff, a lot of grist for the mill, things that you can roleplay off of, and there's a lot of good leads that you can give players so that they know a couple different things that they could go to next. You're always giving them plenty of good evidence that points towards them being a witch and stuff that points away from them. So players can use these little sheets to start racking up the evidence and start thinking about, what is most of the evidence pointing towards, start formulating their own theories, perhaps becoming just as paranoid as the NPCs in the setting. If you'd like to check this out for yourself, I will put links as usual down below where you can get it in PDF form or in print form. And thank you for watching. Before we go, shout out to some of our new patrons over on Patreon. These new patrons include BT Newberg, Buffo, Pax, Bosun Ow, Bigelow, Travis Johnson, Chicken Dragon, Matthew Botha, Ty Morris, Ryan Browser, Callahan, Leo Hunt, Aiden, Noise Reaper, Joshua N., Jared J. Bullas, and Anders Nilsson. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, and I'll see you guys next time.